Hello and welcome to Rise of Humanity. I am your host Chris Karamai, and today I'm joined by life coach and blogger Ryann Pitcavage. Ryann is a passionate coach who works to help her clients let go of the lies they think they are supposed to live and instead create meaningful and inspired lives from a place of real authenticity. Ryann has a great story of her own in getting to where she is today, and we've got lots to talk about on the show, so let's just get started. Ryann, thank you very much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. So, before we get into the coaching work and your story, I've seen on your website you've got this awesome list of 40 things you love to do outside of your coaching, and there's some
Yeah.
really cool things on there: skydiving, skiing, and it sounds like you've got a really good balance between your work and enjoying time outside of that. I mean, tell us about it. How do you maintain that balance, and why is it so important to you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think balance is important no matter what you're doing. And I think it can be really easy to go in one extreme, one up to one of the sides. And I think for me, I'm just a really, playful and fun person. And so I find that I do my best work as a coach and I show up best as a person when I get to have fun, when I get to spend some time doing the things that really rejuvenate me. Because I do put a lot of who I am and what I am into my work. And so it's really helpful to replenish that with things that just make me happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
tell me about the skydiving, because I've heard that can be quite an awesome experience.
Yeah.
I even know one entrepreneur who says he skydives to relax. So, is
Yeah.
it? What was that
Yeah.
like?
I did it for the first time actually. It was on my mom's birthday, but I didn't want to tell her I was doing it because I didn't want to ruin her birthday by scaring her. But I was in college, and a friend of mine and I had heard of a group going skydiving, and they were like, "Well, we were looking for more people to fill up the group, so you want to come?" And so I signed up and just did it. And then I did bungee jumping in New Zealand as well. I'm a bit of a thrill seeker in some
Yeah.
sense. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I don't know that for me it's quite as much a hobby as, something you just do every now and then for fun. But yeah.
Yeah, I did. Was that a tandem one then, or was it
Yeah,
solo? Yeah,
you have to do like a ton of skydives before you can go by
yeah.
yourself.
I
Yeah.
did a tandem hang gliding in Brazil over Rio,
Oh, awesome.
and that was a pretty cool experience. So
That sounds incredible.
yeah, it was great fun. So you've got this coaching business that you're doing. You're helping to change people's lives, and sounds like you're doing some really great work, which we'll get into in a bit. But if we draw a line across the point in time when you began your coaching, what was life like before that, the other side of that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, I think the person who I am is generally at its core the same, but how I lived my life and spent my time and my energy has shifted dramatically. And so I always like to think like I really still am the same person, but I've just learned how to live a life in a more fulfilling way. And so, yeah, before I started coaching, I'll kind of go back and give the brief summarized version because there were more years of my life that I was living before then than now.
Yeah.
So I grew up, was always super high achieving, overachieving, kind of perfectionist personality. Always pushing myself to the limits, to the extremes, wanting to be the best at pretty much anything that I tried to do. But that also ended up trickling into areas of my life in a negative way. So while on the outside, I was this person who, on paper, I had it all together, right? Supposedly, right? I checked the boxes. I, went to a good school, got good grades, dean's list, honor roll, get a good job, make good money, in shape and all these different things that, people strive to be. But it was crushing me inside to try to balance all of those things. I was, there's a reason that people find it challenging for all of those things to take place at one time, because it's truly not that sustainable. And I was not sleeping for a long time, maybe 4 hours a night, for quite a long time. Was working really hard. And I was really unhappy with who I was on the inside. And so much so that, for years I had, challenges around my body image and spent a lot of energy focusing on that and, my appearance and people pleasing and all of those things that were, in retrospect, it's easy to look back now and say, wow, those weren't maybe the best uses of my energy. I think it's all important because it got me to where I am today, and it all, happens in the way that it needs to. But when I look back in that direction, I don't think I could go back ever. I mean, the thought of it just, it's like, wow, it's such a shift in terms of how I spend my time and energy now.
Yeah, it's a big transformation. I mean, you talked about people pleasing there. Did you feel that you were kind of trying to live up to someone's standards or just societal standards and, create that image of a perfect life? Is that what was going on?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think at the time I thought everyone was like always trying to be perfect. I didn't realize it was me who was just really killing myself. But I felt that for me, actually, the people pleasing, now that I can see it for what it is, it really came from a place of I really wanted people to perceive me in a certain way. And I really wanted everyone to like me. And so it was really a matter of trying to control other people's perceptions of me, which is silly because you really can't do that. But at the time, it felt like, well, if I just do everything that everyone needs me to do and I'm the person everyone needs me to be, well, then it's easy, right? Because then everyone will like me and everyone will think, oh, she's great and she's got it together. But, the truth is there were still people who, didn't like me or who, weren't my biggest fans like at the time. But it felt like it was worth it at the time.
So would you say along that journey you kind of shifted more inward? Because it sounds like it was stuck in that trap of trying to validate with the external.
Totally. Yeah. It was a lot of external validation that I was seeking, which is funny because I had never really heard that term until I first worked with a coach and she said it to me. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't want external validation. But, obviously you start to look like maybe I do. But yeah, I think I've always been actually a fairly inward person. I'm an INFJ, kind of as a side note, on like the Myers-Briggs, which were actually that kind of person is really known for being someone who can be outgoing and can be in a social situation, but their core is a more quiet and reserved, introspective person. And that's kind of how I would describe myself, is that I can be the person in the room who's making the jokes and who's going around, but I also always like to reflect. So yeah, I would say that I don't know if I went any more inward per se, so much as it is that I realized what was going on inside. Because I think I was actually super inward at that time because I was so focused on like running anxious thoughts through my head and analyzing every situation. And so I spent a lot of time in my head, which is why shifting out of that was actually really amazing for me, because when I'm not spending so much time dwelling on myself and who I am and should I have done that, shouldn't I have done that, I'm able to focus my energy more outwardly, I would argue, because, I'm not so consumed by controlling my appearance and my achievements and all of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny because that's something that kind of came up for me just last week. So when I'm thinking about, where I want to take my business and, I need to achieve this and that. And then, but if you come at it from a place of, oh, I'm not complete and I need to do that before I can feel like, okay, now I'm ready, it limits you hugely. And when you come from a place of love for yourself, it does dramatically improve your impact because, everything will just flow and you can put more energy into your work. But if you come at towards the same outcome from a place of lack, I think that makes it a lot more difficult and probably does limit your impact in a way. I think that's kind of similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. I think when you're doing that, when you're coming from a place of feeling full and feeling comfortable with who you are, you're then just acting from that place, rather than when I'm coming from the place of this is intended to make me feel better about myself, or this is intended to make me a better person or more qualified or good enough, then that's where the energy that I'm bringing to whatever I'm doing. So I could be doing the same thing, but the energy I'm bringing to it isn't the same, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. So, talk about when you met this life coach that you work with, because that was reading on your website was a real turning point for in your whole journey, and it sounds like it was related to body image and things like that as well, which was played a big part in it. So, just if you could just expand on that a bit.
Yeah, totally. So it was really transformative. So what happened is I had been really intensely for a lot of years focused on getting the time in the gym, getting, the right food and weighing the food and counting it, and very consumed by the whole thing and by my weight and all of that. And so one summer I went on a vacation and I had no access to a gym. I had no access to, it was an international trip too. So, even the food that I did buy, I couldn't even read what was in it really. There was a lot of control that was removed. And the thought of going on the trip at first kind of freaked me out because I thought, well, I'm not sure if I can go on this because I can't control all these things that I like to do. Then I thought, that's crazy. I'm not going to not go on this trip of a lifetime because of this. So I go and I went and I came back. And shortly after coming back, I realized how much more free I felt not living this constrained lifestyle of really just spending so much time and energy thinking about these things and spending, 2+ hours a day in the gym and that kind of a thing. So I thought I need to find somebody who can help me to, learn how to treat my body in a way that's not so regimented, that's not so time consuming and taxing and not so strict. Like someone who can help me feel good about my body, but also live my life. So I ended up finding my first coach, and at the time she was actually a personal trainer as well, and had been certified as a coach. But I reached out to her with the intent more of, it's great because she was empowering women, but she also still kind of had that personal trainer vibe that I don't think I was quite ready to let go of yet. Mm-hmm. And so we talked on the phone. We spoke. And I thought, this woman, she's got it. Like she can help me. I like this. And then she told me how much it was going to cost to work with her. And I thought, oh man, I don't know if I can spend that much money to invest in myself. That feels like a lot, right? And I think a lot of people when they work with coaches for the first time can feel that way. Like, what? That's how much it costs to have a coach? But there was just something inside of me that was just so clearly a yes. And that moment of trusting that part, I think, is really what started to change and shift the direction of my life, because saying yes to her and working with her ended up really changing my experience, because we did personal training for about 2 sessions and then we completely shifted course and started to really talk about the layers underneath of why I had so much trouble connecting with my body and appreciating it, and why I spent so much time hating it and trying to fix it all the time. And obviously, as I'm sure you would be aware of, with the work you do, is like there's so many more layers to it than that. And our bodies are just this easy, tangible thing that we can kind of project our inner stuff onto. Mm-hmm. And it's so much easier to see progress, right? Like, oh, I go to the gym and it feels linear. Like if I go enough times, then I improve, right? Whereas sometimes this inner work, this self-help work, can be more of a spiral, right? It's like, oh, good, okay, I got through that, but then all of a sudden it comes around again. You thought, wait, I thought I already dealt with that. And it's a little bit harder for, most people to really go in and to go to those, sore places inside. And so it feels a lot easier to just address the outside. And so working with her really just opened up my eyes to, a lot of the problems that we perceive in our lives aren't actually the problem. It's a lot of our thinking and our beliefs that are driving those behaviors and our perception, and that there's actually usually something much deeper and much more personal to it than something merely tangible and, just a job or just a body or just a relationship. There's usually something a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the food, I hear quite a lot, which I completely agree with, that it almost has nothing to do with the food itself. It's all... I mean, obviously, to a degree it does, but really it's if you have, for example, an eating problem, instead of trying to fix everything and change all your macronutrients and all that kind of stuff. Move inward and ask yourself, what's really going on, what's the underlying reason, because there always is an underlying imbalance. It's the emotional aspect, and as you said, going inward and doing that inner work is more difficult, but it's so much more transformative. I mean, I'd say you could spend one day of moving inward and just taking a day to yourself is worth 10 days of just going out into the world and running around trying to change everything. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I think, one reason why I share this part of my story too is that I think I consider the body kind of a home for our spirits or our souls or whatever word you like to use. And we are so disconnected from our bodies, and we kind of, have left ourselves with these bodies that we just carry around, and we live from the neck up in our heads. And so that's a lot of the people I work with as clients can, tend to feel a little bit dissociated from their bodies, because culturally it's like not even just an individual thing. It's pretty common in our culture now to just live in your head and to be very intellectual. And for me, I think that's why this was such a transformative part of my journey, was that to reconnect with my body, to learn to trust it, to learn, what were some of the real drivers behind my dissatisfaction with it and all of that, and reconnecting with it, taking better care of it. All of that brought me back into my body. Whereas most of my life was just an intellectual ego pursuit. And I was leaving my spirit and my soul really without much of a home to live in, because my body was just like, somewhere else. It wasn't really with me. And so I always like to think about that too, is that's one of the biggest things that I like to help clients do, is to get back into their bodies. To help start, thinking about things and making decisions based on the sensations we're feeling in our bodies. Because we can pro and con list everything. We can intellectualize and analyze anything, but there sometimes comes a point where you just can't really figure it out. And I find that with clients, sometimes it then just helps to go in and to actually feel how things feel. And people can get pretty clear pretty quick, actually. Because sometimes the best option doesn't always make the most logical sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only way to really move into a life of fulfillment is you have to look inward at some point, and that's where the answer's like. You'll never spreadsheet it, you'll never figure it out that way. You can to a degree, right, but there will come a time, as you said, when you just have to move inward and look at the bigger picture. So completely agree with that. Yeah. So was this meeting this coach obviously helped you with your body image? Was that then the catalyst for you getting into coaching yourself? I mean, were you working still in the corporate world at the same time while you were working with the coach, or?
Yeah, so I was in the corporate world at the time, and I worked with her, and at the time I didn't really tell anyone that I was working with her, because at the time I was kind of ashamed going along that whole perfectionist trail of I didn't really want people to know that I was struggling, or that I was having these problems and that I paid this much money to help, deal with my problems. I thought, okay, this is embarrassing. But it's not. But at the time I felt it really was. And so, I worked with her. She had such a profound impact on my life. And I thought, this is how I want to help people. Like, this is what I want to do. I had always been the friend who liked to listen to people, who liked to give advice, who liked to help people through their problems, to be the person to lean on. And while, coaching and being a friend are two different things, the general gist of what I like to do, I thought that was just a skill you had. I thought, okay, you're either just a good friend, or you would go be, a psychiatrist, or get your PhD. And that didn't totally appeal to me. And so I thought, okay, well, this is just something I'm good at. And then when I saw her doing this, and I said, and I paid her to do this? So that's a job? Like, people can do this for a living? That really changed my life, because at the time I wasn't really satisfied in my corporate career. But I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what that next step would be. So it kind of felt like, well, I can't just leave and not know what I'm going to do, which is, a whole other topic. But the time, I was like certainly not going to leave unless I felt I knew something different. And so working with her, I thought this is my next thing I'm working towards. Like, this being a coach thing is awesome. And so yeah, I think that totally shifted the direction when I realized how much of an impact she had on me. And it was something that I was so personally drawn to. I thought, of course, this is so clear. You know, I mean, we met for a lot of reasons. I think one of them being that she really gave me the freedom to move past some of the things that don't matter so much and to move into, you know, my true purpose and to step into that, because I had so much more energy to do that. But I also think that working with her in and of itself was inspirational in terms of my career path going forward.
Yeah. And
yeah,
it's funny you say that, because about, you know, giving the advice and stuff, because it's the same with a lot of people. You might not realize it, but you've been doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing for years, just obviously haven't been making money from it, and you haven't been charging for it, but you've got it inside within you already, and it's just a matter of just pulling it out, really. But yeah, it's awesome that you had that awareness and you were able to see that. So talking about actually bridging the gap between the corporate and then the new coaching, what did that look like? Was there a leap of faith that had to take place, or did you manage to make it quite gradual, or what was that process like?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask that. So I, you know, even after working with her, I stayed in the corporate world. I didn't really feel comfortable leaving at the time. There was, you know, a lot of different things that I wanted to figure out first. I also think part of it too was I had this idea that there was going to be this magical number in my bank account. And when I reached that, then that would be the time that I would go and I would do something different. So I stayed, and the plan was for it to be really gradual, for it to be build the coaching business up to a certain level and then take the leap. But it ended up being pretty clear from a lot of different ways. And then, Chris, I don't know how you feel about, like, you know, signs or synchronicity or any of that kind of stuff, but it became pretty clear to me through a lot of different ways that it was time for me to leave, and that my time had come to kind of answer the call. And you know, it was manifesting in different ways in my body through illness, and also through I'll share a fun story too, is that on the day that I you know, quit my job, for like a month before, I had said I want to find, you know, like a lucky penny every day, and that's going to be my sign that this is the right move. And so I did. I found more than a lucky penny every day. I had a pile of lucky pennies, and I thought, okay, all right, I don't know how I feel about that. So then I did, you know, like oracle cards, and like the ridiculous number of times I pulled the same card, which is trust your intuition. I thought, okay, still me being like skeptical, being like, okay, no, I need one more sign. So I go and I said, okay, I'm going to quit, and I want it to be clear before I go that this is the right move. So I'm on my way to work, and as I'm getting on the train to go to work, I see above me there is a graffiti. And I said, you know, I've never noticed graffiti here before. I really don't think I've ever seen graffiti here before. And the sign said, just do it. And I thought, okay, well, that's pretty funny. I'm like, maybe I just never noticed it, you know, who knows? So I go to work. I'm like kind of listening to a meditation app on the subway to calm my nerves. I'm like, okay, I'm going to just do it. I'm going to just do it. And I did it. The next day I go to work because, you know, I gave notice. I didn't leave like that day. I'm going to work the next day, and I look, and where it had said, just do it, there was a sign that said wet paint, and it had been painted over. And it was gone. So it was, to me, I was like, okay, you know, even though it was scary, and even though it maybe logically didn't make sense, there were so many signs to me pointing that was what needed to happen, that it's pretty undeniable for me. So yeah, so it's kind of like this. It was supposed to be gradual and logical, but it ended up being way more just trusting and just taking the leap.
Yeah, that's an awesome story.
Yeah.
And looking for those signs, it's funny because obviously, like you said, you struggle to believe. And it's funny how many signs that we need to, to finally believe, because I've had that same thing and I keep asking for signs, and they keep coming up. I'm just like, yes, how many times do you need to see it? You're ready, just do it. And so that's happening for me like loads lately. But taking that actual leap in for me, because I literally just left my job I knew there was something out there for me, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. But for me, I was doing, I had the best job. It's not my dream job by any means, but I had the best job that I'd had up to that point in my life. And I did it for about 6 months. I was like, yeah, this is going quite well. And then by about, month 5, I suddenly got that feeling. It wasn't a sign. It was like that feeling within me that something's not right. And as soon as literally within a day or two, because I've got that feeling in previous jobs, I was like, this is the sign that I'm supposed to go. I know I'm not supposed to be here. So literally, I think within 2 weeks, I decided to leave, another 2 weeks of notice, and then I was gone. So things move quickly. But yeah, if you keep an eye out for those signs or ask for them, and they're so helpful, and that's an awesome story.
Totally. Yeah, thanks. And I think, honestly, everyone gets signs, to be honest. It's just a matter of whether we're open to seeing them and whether we pay attention and notice them.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. I do love that.
Yeah, awesome. So what was it like? So did you get a few clients, and while you had your corporate job, did you build up a little bit, or was it just a complete, you left and then got your first client?
Yeah, it was more the latter. I had left, and I actually took a little bit of time after I left, right. About 2 months, to just decompress and get clear on how I wanted to move forward, because I had kind of been in this cycle for all these years of how I approach things. And one of my, fellow coach friends and I have talked about it before, is kind of the corporate mindset versus kind of like a soul-based mindset of how you approach things. And so I wanted to be mindful, and I still think I always try to be mindful of how to not enter with necessarily a corporate mindset into a passion and spiritual-based business. Mm-hmm. That's not to say there aren't certain skills and stuff that I learned that I don't, leverage, but being careful not to jump too quickly into something else and just doing something differently but the same way, right?
Yeah.
Because I think for me, a lot of the problem wasn't necessarily that I hated the content of what I was doing. It was, a lot of it was how it was being done. And it was the expectation on hours, and the expectation on everything's urgent, and it's good to stay late in the office and get in early, and show that you're the hardest worker. And not that those are bad things, but for me, those were things that didn't necessarily make me feel great. And so I wanted to be sure that I crafted my business from a place of what makes me feel good and how do I want this to work, rather than just taking what I had been doing and transferring it now to my own business, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I took a little bit of time off before I started taking any clients, because I just wanted to have a clean foundation and kind of clear that space for myself.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. There's so many similarities between our stories, because I kind of had to do that, and that it's like a cleansing almost, and just letting go. But at the same time, yeah, you say that you took a lot of learnings from the corporate world, but you had to make that shift into that more soul-based spiritual life. And I was going to ask you about that actually, because it's like the way I see it, it's kind of a balancing of masculine and feminine energy, and everyone has those within them, if you're a man or a woman. But that hustle like corporate, work 17 hours a day, that's very masculine. And I think people who are in that place, they lack that feminine balance, which I had to work in that way in my previous job. It was 14, 16-hour shifts sometimes with a 20-minute sit down in the middle. But I don't think, to really find a fulfilling and meaningful, higher vibratory job or career, whatever it is, business, I think you have to balance it with that spiritual, that feminine, spiritual, soulful, side of things. So it sounds like you've really started to incorporate that now.
Yeah, and I think I always like to be super transparent too with people, is that when I first started, I think the pendulum swung a little bit in the other direction as an extreme. So I think there was a part of me that was like, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater, and kind of like, I don't want anything to do with how I used to be, and fearing that if I did go anywhere near that it would kind of fall back into that. So I think for me, it's actually taken a little bit of time to actually more come into balance with that masculine and feminine, because I was so in the masculine for most of my life that I had to learn how to be in the feminine, but I almost felt like I needed to swing in the complete other direction to fully feel and understand what that felt like, to be able to come somewhere in the middle, somewhere a little more in between. And I don't think, we're completely 50-50. I don't think a lot of people, I think some people kind of do tend to be a little more of one than the other, even if they are fairly balanced. But yeah, for me, I definitely had to go in that other extreme of no structure, no nothing, and then move into, okay, how can I create structure that helps me flow? So one of my coaches that I've worked with, this is a different individual than who we were talking about. She was a bit of a mentor for me last year, and she was telling me her analogy, which I always love to share with people, is that you have a river, right? And in order for a river to exist, you need to have a river bed and you need to have water. And without one or the other, the river doesn't exist, right? The power, the flow, the beauty of a river doesn't exist without both. So the masculine being the riverbed, it is the holder of space, the container, the structure, the outline. Whereas you have the feminine, which is just flow and power and going, and it's kind of everywhere, and it's very fluid, and so it's kind of trying to be more of a river rather than just being water or just being the riverbed. And so I always like to use that analogy for people, because I think it helps them to think about it in a sense of, oh yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of what I'll call, recovering kind of corporate refugees kind of, a lot of times can be a little bit afraid to do anything masculine, because we're almost a little bit traumatized by how we've been treated and asked to behave and live our lives for all this time, that we're afraid that if we dip a toe in the water, that, oh my God, it's not going to end well. I don't want to go back to that. And so I think the most important thing is finding that balance. And sometimes that does mean having to completely swing in the opposite direction for a little bit to find that doesn't really work either. Yeah,
it is a continuous, balancing act, and you're learning all along. But it's it's a great analogy. And and I study and follow quite a few different spiritual teachers, and something that pops up again and again is that this balance of masculine and feminine energy is essential for ascension. I mean, you can struggle and hold on to one or the other, but you have to, if you want to move to the higher levels of living and awareness, that balance is essential. So just for people listening, just to have that awareness and not be afraid of bringing in maybe some of that, more of that masculine energy if you're lacking that, or certainly if you're all hustle, take a bit of time out and move inward and cultivate that feminine energy within yourself. So important. So yeah, thanks for sharing that analogy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does your approach to like taking a new client on look like? If someone comes to you and says, Ryann, my life's falling apart, I don't know what to do. What does the process look like for you?
Yeah, totally. So if, when someone comes up to me or, sends me an email or message, wanting to work together, usually first thing I want to do is just get on the phone. I find it super important for a lot of reasons. One is, I really just want to get a clear idea of where they're at. Because it's a lot of times too, if we're in this panic mode, it can be a little unclear, like what exactly is going on. We just feel like it's falling apart. but we don't really actually understand what's going on. So I really just like to get a clear picture of that. I like to help them see, how I could help them. And then a lot of what we do is just see if it's fit. I think there's a lot of different styles to marketing and sales in the coaching world, and everyone kind of has their own thing and has to find what works for you. And for me, I have a deep sense of integrity. So for me, it's been super important to find a way that feels the best to work with people. And I find for me is, people might say, okay, well, convince me. Why should I work with you or something, right? Something along those lines. And I'm not here to convince anybody to work with me, actually. The way I see it is if we've come into each other's lives, it's for a reason, even if that reason is just that 30-minute phone call we have, that gives them something to go to the next place, or it teaches me something. But I'm very much into people feeling like this is a good fit, that I'm the right coach. And then for me, also feeling like they're a good client and they're someone I could actually help, right? Because sometimes people see what I do and they think, oh, okay, well, she's going to read my resume and help me find a new job. And while there's lots of really awesome coaches out there that do that stuff, that's not really the work I do. So I really just like to get super clear with people, make sure we're both vibing well, that it feels like a good thing, that they have all their questions answered. And then if it feels like a fit, we go forward. And I usually do my first call actually as a 2-hour call, and the calls after that are an hour. But I just really like to get to know people and treat them, build the relationship. So I don't like to see it as a transaction of, okay, you work with me for an hour and you pay me this much for an hour. And that's why I don't offer single sessions either, because I see coaching as creating a container of space for people. And I would only really feel comfortable talking to someone on a one-off if we had already worked together, as a client, because I feel like part of it is getting to know someone is really important in helping their unique process, right? Because not everybody is the same. Not everybody goes at the same pace or responds to the same things. Some people are super visual. Some people are really tactile or auditory, or some people are really emotional. Some people have a really hard time tapping into their emotions. And so I like to use that first 2-hour phone call just to get to know them as a person. Like, who are you, and what's your life like? Like, what's your daily life like? What's your family like? Actually get to know somebody, and then we can start going into coaching, and actually moving forward. But I find having contacts actually really deepens the bond and the trust that I've had with my clients.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
yeah,
I think looking at your website, you do careers, relationships, and do you help with body image as well? What would you say you attract most in clients, or is it just a balance, really?
Yeah, I think it can kind of be a balance if I'm thinking about it in my mind here. Because I tend to find that people who are challenged by some of the things that I list on my website and that I talk about, a lot of it kind of comes from a similar core. A lot of my clients are the super duper high achieving type. They are the people who are pushing themselves to the limits. And, while it is more common for women than men, the body image thing often comes for, people who are that way. Like, they don't just say, oh, okay, I care a lot about being perfect in every other area, but like my body, I don't, right? A lot of times that kind of just ends up happening. It's a holistic kind of thing. Yeah. I see my clients as, a whole person. I know in the world of coaching, sometimes it's like I only help people with this one area of their life. But mine is more, there's a couple of different areas that it can touch, but it kind of is sourced from that same kind of personality type and that drive and that need to, have external validation and being kind of stressed out and burnt out. And that often kind of comes all together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I imagine that because of what you've been doing, your journey into coaching, I imagine that helps you really resonate with your clients on a deeper level than, if you just come into coaching because you liked it or heard about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, some of the feedback I've gotten from clients, when I ask them after we're finished coaching, like, what are your thoughts? Or I ask them while we're coaching, what are your thoughts? And One of the common things I hear is that while I'm, very professional, that I do feel like a safe, really good friend in that sense, and that because I do feel relatable, and that they really do enjoy when I share, just a little snippet of, here's an example of how this has played out for me, or, and, everyone has different methodologies and how they like to approach coaching. And I'm not really very directive with what I tell people to do, but I do find that sharing sometimes some personal anecdotes can actually really help people to see it in its form in coming to life. Because a lot of times these concepts are so abstract, or people feel, I'm the only person who feels this way, or I'm the only one who's gone through this. And so when I'm able to share experiences of my own, I sometimes find that helps people to feel comfortable opening up, about what's going on with them. Because, for a lot of us, we don't really have that one safe person that we can go to with everything that also doesn't have an opinion of what we should do. Because, a lot of times people will ask me as a coach, oh, so, do you feel like you'd be biased in this way or that way? But the reality is that I think one of the greatest things coaches provide to their clients is that third-party objective perspective, right? Is that I have zero investment in what you end up choosing to do and how you end up choosing to change or not change or live your life or not. And so I think sometimes people feel safer sharing because they're not afraid of how it's going to impact our relationship, or they don't assume that I'm going to tell them to do this because, because if I did that, then this would mean this for you. And so, yeah, I know that was a little bit of a tangent to your question, but I think it's actually all important.
Yeah. So, you touched on it a little bit there, but what would you say are the main core qualities in yourself that you bring? Keeping, obviously you said there that you don't get overly attached to a particular outcome for them. I suppose you have to, it's important to be compassionate as well. What kind of things do you aim to bring to create that space for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is meeting people where they are. And not, that means like some days they're going to come and have a really rough time and be crying, and it's going to be really upsetting, and just holding that space for them to express those feelings. And compassion is most definitely part of that. But I also think part of what I do as a coach too is that, you just have to be mindful of and intuitive, I guess. I think that's something for me is like I can really pick up on the energy of the other person, of where they're at. And so sometimes it is the right move to say, be a little bit of tough love a little bit, right? Like, yeah. I believe in you and you can do this. I know you're kind of, BSing, because I know you and you're capable. But then sometimes that's not the time for that. Like sometimes someone's just like, I need to be heard. I'm feeling rough and I need someone to just hold that space for me. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I bring as a coach. I think also, to be honest, I love being silly. So my sense of humor, I think people enjoy sometimes, because coaching can get so serious. And at times that's appropriate and that's the thing, but also sometimes to lighten it up a little bit and, be able to make fun of ourselves and not take things too seriously. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that go into coaching, but I think the biggest thing, they've shown in research studies, and I'm not a therapist, but, coaching and that therapy can sometimes use certain similar techniques. And they've actually shown that there's no one therapeutic technique that is the number one, A1, grade A, guaranteed thing to do. And that's the best thing that you can do for someone is to have a loving presence. And so that's what I always like to do, is just be super present for who I'm with, right? Not having anything else distracting me, but just really fully being there for the hour that we're on the phone. And sometimes just being witnessed and being heard, and someone checking in with you every week, is the biggest benefit, right? Of course, I have my tools and techniques and journaling questions and meditations and all this, but the real, I think, biggest impact comes from just having that outlet and having that person. And yeah, I think for me, in order to be that way before a session, I usually just like to get a little quiet and prepare myself with what it is that what's my intention, setting an intention for the session. So most often for me, it's that, that I help, so-and-so find their truth or find what feels right is best for them, what best serves them, any sort of permutation of that. Rather than, okay, I'm really going to get Chris to quit his job finally today. We're really going to work towards that, right? It's more like I'm going to help Chris find what's true for him and what best serves him. And that may or may not be, quitting your job, just as an example.
Yeah, great. Keeping that open space.
Totally.
Yeah, that's awesome. So through all the work that you're doing with your clients, what's your deepest desire for all the people you work with, and what are your plans and for your impact of the future? Is that something you think about much, or are you just kind of going with the flow?
Yeah. I mean, I think I have pretty big dreams and visions. Sometimes like so big that I need to come back down to earth, not in the sense that they're not doable, but that I need to break them down into realistic, actionable steps to make it happen. But yeah, no, certainly. I think one of my biggest things is helping people to, so a lot of us have like this split energy kind of between the unavoidable fact of who you are and then the person we're really trying to be. And I know you touched on that a little bit in the beginning of this interview. And it's really exhausting to have your energy split like that. And kind of, I always think of it like you have your foot in like two different rowboats, and then like the boat starts to start going apart and you're starting to do a split and you're like doing everything to just keep the two together. And so usually it's like, okay, jump in one of these boats, you're gonna like fall in the water. And sometimes falling in the water is what's gotta happen. But yeah, I think my biggest thing is helping people to reclaim that energy and to just own who they really are and create the life they really want. I think so much of what is disempowering for people is that we give our power away and our energy away to so many things outside of us. And when I talk about empowering people, a lot of that is reclaiming that energy and reclaiming your time and reclaiming your everything, your space for yourself to live a life that you want, rather than one that, someone thinks that you should want or that you should be living. Mm. And with that comes, not always just living in our heads. And, I talked about a little bit earlier, but like reintroducing the body and some of that wisdom into the conversation, and reintroducing some other things that we have kind of ignored for a long time and kind of shoved down for a long time. Our emotions. A lot of us, even if we cry sometimes or something, we don't really truly allow ourselves to feel our emotions. And when we do, we think, oh, I shouldn't be sad or I shouldn't be angry. And we have feelings that we've considered to be bad. Mm-hmm. And our emotions are super valuable. And that's something I work with a lot with my clients, is teaching them how to actually leverage their emotions to learn about what's going on. For example, a lot of people talk about this of anger. A lot of times anger has to do with boundaries that have either been crossed or boundaries that have not been set, but that should have been set. And it's really just an indicator, hey, Ryan, okay, there's a boundary that needs to happen here, right? Or there's something that needs to change. And anger is intended to be the trigger for, okay, Ryan, pay attention. Take a look at what's going on. Why are you angry, right? Rather than me saying, oh, why am I angry? I shouldn't be angry. I should really be more peaceful. I should be more zen. I should just be calm. Why can't I be chill? Why do I let things get to me so much, And so I think that that's, all part of it too, is helping people to reclaim their relationship to their emotions and actually start using them to improve their life.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely not something that need to be squashed down. They're there for a reason. They're just trying to tell you something. If you come from that place, it begins to benefit you in a big way.
Totally.
Awesome. So the question I like to ask my guests in every interview, and that is, what would be your best advice on how people can contribute to the rise of humanity?
Ooh. I'm not sure what other people have answered. I'd be curious to listen to some of the other answers you've gotten. But I think for me, the best thing that we can do, I forget who said the quote, but it's like, yesterday I wanted to change the world, so I was like trying to change other people. And today I wanted to change the world, so I'm changing myself. That's totally butchering the quote, but when I say rise of humanity, it's the way I see it is that the best way to elevate other people begins with elevating ourselves and rising ourselves. And so while I don't think that means we don't help other people or we don't reach an arm out and, help somebody on their own journey and help them to elevate themselves, but that we first and foremost take responsibility for where we are and creating our most fulfilling life and moving closer towards our truth. Because I do truly believe that we are all born to bring different gifts and amazing things to this world. And that when we don't really own who we are, the world loses out on that. I think that we all have something to offer, and it's a shame, that people just hide that and are, ignore that, and instead force themselves to be this person that they think they're supposed to be and meet these requirements and get the gold star, and, not being able to just own their uniqueness and do these different things. I mean, I think you're seeing it in corporations as more and more younger people are starting to find that they either want to work for themselves or they want to work at a smaller company or someone who's doing something totally different, changing up the market. Because I think a lot of us are starting to realize that, there's got to be a different way to go about this, and to make a meaningful impact in the world. And so, yeah, I think the biggest thing to do is to recognize that you totally have something meaningful to offer to the world, no matter how small it may seem. And if you do more of that and you are kinder to yourself and follow your joy and what brings you delight, I think that that's the biggest thing we can do to contribute to the rise of humanity.
That's awesome. I love that answer.
Yeah.
Because I have got a few different answers to that question, but I actually used to ask it in two parts. I used to ask how can people elevate themselves and then elevate humanity, but one thing that kept coming up is it was almost the same answer for each question: work on yourself and you'll change the world in the process.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the kind of thing that you're saying there. If you work on yourself, you'll change the world in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it kind of goes back to full circle, honestly, in our conversation, where that whole thing where when you're coming from that place of fulfillment, no matter what you're doing, you're having a greater impact, and it's probably way more enjoyable too.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's probably you're actually enjoying yourself. But it's, a lot of people think if I just give myself up, if I just give everything I have and who I am to the world, that's the gift that I'm giving to the world. But when you are so tired and depleted and unhappy and stressed that, you took some time to take care of yourself, I think the impact of whatever it is that you're doing already, even if it doesn't change, even if you don't quit your job, even if you do the exact same thing, when you're showing up from that place, I think that too also contributes,
That's awesome. Thank you. So if you could just share with the listeners where we can find out more about you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could go to my website, which is just RyannPitcavage.com. And I also have an Instagram, which is Ryann Pitcavage, which I post on that quite a bit. And yeah, I have an email list. I send out weekly inspirational content. I've been doing a lot of video lately. So if you're up for that, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And I'll stick the link to your website in the show notes. So it's been great to have you on the show today, Ryan. Really appreciate you coming on. And thank you so much for sharing your story and the work you're doing. And I wish you the best in your journey going forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. You too. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. That's all for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you are looking to do something big with your life and in the world, then it's stories like Ryan's which show you that it is all possible, and it really is. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.